It's real. It's real. You know the deal. You know the deal. Come on.
Hey, it's Shanté.
And I'm Natalie. And welcome to What's the Deal, a podcast powered by The Norfus Firm. At The Norfus Firm, we solve people problems. We work with employers all around the world on HR and DEI initiatives. We really are foolish today. We've really been like, the laughs, the giggles, but it's so fun. And I'm so happy for it. So some of y'all will listen and watch at a different time than we're taping. So just for perspective, it's August 2023. And one of my favorite seasons, summer, is coming to an end. Actually, summer is totally my favorite season. I always say that summers are for growth. Because I put that around, a lot of us, even as adults, are still around a school schedule if you have kids or you're in school. So summer for me as a parent is always a marker of, cool, we have a break from all the schoolwork and we get to do a lot more exploration and the like. And I always see that both me and my son, we both elevate and something really cool happens for us in the summer where we had that space to grow. And I feel like this summer was no different. This summer was epic, really, for both of us. Great.
I personally am a fall girl. Fall is my favorite season. But that's just because I like coats and boots.
Hi, I'm Shanté. And I like long fall. Walks with colorful flowers.
Leaves on the ground. Leaves. And apple cider in my cup. And nice sunsets.
Got it. So you and I have been on all the planes, the trains, the feet, the bikes, in the past 3-4 months. And it was a really, I think for both of us in somewhat different reasons, although we had some things in common, it was one of these things that was mind blowing in a really great way. And so we wanted to kind of come here and say, okay, share our travels with you in a way that sort of ties to some of the observations we had about how travel and traveling can really positively impact DEI programming and initiatives and how leaders show up in their organizations. And I think that, it was, okay, let me get my brain together here. First off, where the heck did we go? Together and separately. Yeah. I don't want to make it sound like we did all these things together. We did a lot together, but
definitely different itineraries throughout the spring and summer. So, mine really started late spring, so around my birthday, late April, and that was Panama for me.
She's a Taurus, y'all.
Yeah, I'm a Taurus. Hey, in case you didn't catch it. Yes, I'm a Taurus. And that Panama was that trip. And then throughout the early part of this late spring, early summer was DC, Atlanta, New York. Did we go to all those places together?
We did.
We went to all those places together. And then I recently got back from Southern Africa. So I did Cape Town and Johannesburg in South Africa. I did Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, and then Chobe Safari National Park. So that's it. I think Kasane, I forget how to pronounce it, in Botswana. And that's just to this point.
No, it's not, because we went to Detroit.
We did go to Detroit. Totally forgot. And Detroit was epic. Totally forgot about Detroit.
Detroit was epic.
Man, that was what was that, 36 hours?
We were 30. I think it was 30 hours, and we maximized
every
24 of those hours.
It's
absolutely.
But yeah, no, and that's just to this point. Like you said, August 2023, because I like fall, there's a lot of traveling coming up in the fall too for me. So
yeah.
Where'd you go?
Outside of the places that we went together, I went to LA, Spain, Portugal, France, the UK, the Netherlands, Monaco, Atlanta.
Atlanta.
Going to Cleveland, my hometown, this weekend.
Nice.
CLE.
Oh, I'm going to Greensboro this weekend. Although they don't know what weekend. Anyway, we're doing a lot of traveling. Guys.
Yeah. So, all right. So we've gone some places.
Yeah.
And
domestic and international.
Yeah. And so when we think about who we are as people, some may call us curious, some may call us nerdy, but I would say we are lifelong learners, and we are so interested in learning new things that help us, serve our clients better, bring you better content, right? It's so critical for us. It's just in our DNA to be and so we had gone to some conferences and we're kind of bummed because we didn't really feel like we walked away with added knowledge. And so we're ho-hum, how do we learn more in this space? And I know that when I hit like the first stop of the time that my son and I spent in Europe, when we hit the streets in Madrid, I'm like, it's traveling. Mm-hmm. So we did some travel observations. We were going to have a full blog, right? Because we felt like there were some takeaways that could be helpful for everyone, that when you're embarking on a trip to places you haven't been or places you have been, what are some things to kind of think about to help sort of tie it to how it relates to DEI? Mm-hmm. So for today's episode, we picked a few that were both really resonated with us, but be on the lookout for the blog that will, help give some more advice.
And where can the blog be found?
thenorfusfirm.com.
Boom.
Under our tools section.
Nice.
So first things first, what was for me, the number one takeaway from all these travels was that no matter how open you think your mind is, it is capable of expanding, right? So a lot of us walk around thinking, hey, we're so open-minded, we're open, right? But when you say that, you don't actually always know what you're open to, because until you continue to add data points to your mental algorithm, right? By exposing yourself to different cultures and places and languages and all of that, you don't really know how open-minded you are. Mm-hmm. And one of the examples I was actually talking to Santi about, our production guru, we love Santi. I was talking to him about this morning, is that there was a sort of middle part of our time in Europe where, you get tired, right? Because you've been on these planes and trains and all of this. And so we took a high-speed train from London to Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And when we arrived, the train experience is amazing. And it made me feel like we are cheated in this country by not having enough trains. And oh my God, it's so beautiful. Well, we get out of the train and everything is in Dutch. And I just kind of oh my God, I don't speak Dutch. I was so overwhelmed, right? Because I was tired. There was nothing in the way that the words were written that computed to something I knew before, right? Like in Portugal, I speak enough Spanish that looking at Portuguese wasn't completely foreign. I could kind of make sense out of a lot of it. Mm-hmm. Same thing being in France. I don't speak French, but Latin language, you can figure it out. And I'm looking at the letters and I'm like, I don't know. And I have my son and I feel like I have to be the protector. I have to know what we're doing. And I don't know what the heck the signs say. So you have that moment and you're like, okay, let's just kind of get it together. What can we work with? Well, number one, there were really amazing pictures that sent you in the direction of a taxi and the like. And more importantly, when I got out of the panic of not speaking Dutch, there were small bylines, but they were in English. Huh. And as it turns out, most people that we came across spoke English. Mm-hmm. So it was okay, you expose yourself to something that's very foreign to your day-to-day, but there's a triumph in trying, right? To say, I'm trying something that's way outside of what I know, and it's helping me see more than what I know. Right. And I think that was such the biggest thing. And it was it made me really just be okay, anything that I encountered that it was not something I was used to. It's okay, you might have that discomfort in the beginning, but just keep going. Because it was so beautiful. And actually, of all the places we traveled, Rotterdam was probably one of my favorites. And we got to see Julia Hernandez, who's our content developer. And that was super freaking cool to see her in a country that's part of her own identity, because she got to teach us a bunch, both in Rotterdam and The Hague. And again, it was here I am to be a sponge and learn on this information. What about you? What was one of the big things for you?
So for me, it's always, whenever I go into places I travel, especially when traveling abroad, I'm always looking for the connections.
Yeah.
So similar to kind of you, how can you orient yourself? For me, it's what are the things that connect us for as humans, right? What are the human connections that we have with people, regardless of background, regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of whatever, there are basic human things that connect us all. And I'm always looking for those things. So I'm really listening to stories, right? What are the stories that people are sharing with me? What are the similarities and that allow me to appreciate the differences, right? We went to there was a place in, where were we? I think we were in Joburg. Right. So we went outside Joburg to Johannesburg. Sorry, I should probably say what it is.
You over here like a TikToker,
right.
Joburg. And it's like, what the heck is
Like,
Joburg, girl?
Johannesburg. And so there was a village, Lesedi village. And so it's kind of like a fabricated village of 5 different tribes that they put together. And it's a performance. So there's like dance and drumming. And so you get a sense of the culture and the foods and all of that. And you go in and it literally took my breath away as I was pulling up, just hearing the sounds, the voices, and how it's very similar to what the voices that you hear, like maybe in like the black church or in black choirs and things. It's like, oh my God, it's the same color of the voice and the drumming and the dancing. It just felt like it really shook me. And then when I got in there, we go through the presentation and I loved all of it. We go into the food hall and they call it the nyama choma or something like that. And nyama, I think someone was telling me from there's like meat or it's related to food in some way. And my family's Jamaican. And so in Patois, people say nyam when you're going to go eat. Like, and I was like, wait, that is an amazing kind of like, although it doesn't necessarily mean the exact same thing, it's related to food. And I was like, yo, so it's those kinds of things where you get to see the connections and you realize that geography, distance, time, it means nothing. Like we are, in essence, connected in the same people.
It's like you actually, first of all, I really appreciated you sharing the videos. I mean, I'm sure being in person was a lot more impactful, but I when you messaged me the videos of the drumming, like chills like in the first 15 seconds. I remember like the second marker, I was like, holy crap, this is like, it just touches your soul. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it touches your soul. And so I think that connection piece is so important because it's almost like, you start to get like, if you were going to take like a globe and start putting the pins of like, okay, food names or approaches to food. And like, it helps to show those connections because certainly we all have very unique aspects of our culture. But I think we find, especially on this human connection piece, that we often have a lot more in common than we think.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are becoming an expected part of the workplace. Not only are more and more employees holding their employers accountable for their social impact, they also want to see inclusive values reflected within the organization. The Norfus Firm can help you work towards impactful diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that make you an employer of choice. Learn more at thenorfusfirm.com.
The other thing that I was thinking about when you talked about human connection is just the random conversations you pick up with people, right? Yeah. Like we were at on the beach in Nice, which was out of this world with their Gatorade blue water. I felt like I was swimming in an aquarium, which was super cool. But we were sitting next to a father from Texas and all these things. We just had a cool ass conversation who like paid for a trip with his grown-up daughters. And so that was really fun to talk to him as a parent to parent. And then his younger daughter was really interested in going to law school. So her and I had this super cool conversation. And it's like, you just find all these new friends places too, right? Especially if you're open enough to say like, hey, this is
what's going on. What's your story? Like, talk to me. Yeah. Yes. It's beautiful.
So the second one I would share that was like, maybe not as like upbeat, is that there's a lot of barriers to access, and that was like really stunning, right? So you look at like for the month of July, we were in Europe. And so it's like there wasn't a lot of accessibility to people who would be in wheelchairs or have some other sort of physical differences. That was pretty huge to see, right? That, wow, okay. I kept saying like, how would someone get here if they were, how would they even be able to go on this or get to this place if they had a wheelchair, right? So there, like just as one example. So there was that. It also really highlighted to me the privilege of being able to travel, right? Having the resources to travel, and resources is not just money, but a big component of it, but the ability to take the time off. For me, the ability to work from anywhere, right? To be able, because I worked for, 3 of the 4 weeks I was gone. So that idea of when you're able to get on a plane, and even if it's to go 2 hours away, there's a privilege to that because there's so many people who may never have the opportunity to hop on a plane or a train and the like, to even go and see all these different places. And then I think the other sort of barrier to access that I was thinking a lot about is like infrastructure. I was like so impressed with the infrastructure around trains and how you could get to so many different places so easily on trains, and relatively inexpensive. And that having that access, like, being able to take the train from UK to the Netherlands and from, Barcelona to Madrid and to, all these other places in between, like you have this access to the world for costs that are not prohibitive to a lot of people. And so at least here in the places I've lived in the US, we don't have that kind of interconnectivity as much, and certainly not here in South Florida. And then like even something as simple as, but is not that simple, just like thinking about bike lanes. Rotterdam, all of the Netherlands have really great bike lanes, but Rotterdam was like glorious because they really designed the city for the bikes to be centerpieces. And like for those of us like me who don't really like driving, and like the ability to walk or to get places another way, oh my gosh, like getting on those bikes was super cool because you're like, oh, it's so safe because it's like you move, it's like a rush hour. It was all these huge bikes like going through. And so, we tried to replicate that. My son and I tried to replicate that. We kept trying to replicate a lot of stuff when we came back to Miami, but it just was not replicable. And the bike lanes in Miami just abruptly stopped. So like we were on a bike lane and it abruptly stops at the highway, like at the entrance to the highway. And we're like, holy crap, we're gonna have to like, ride really fast to like get past all the cars. So it was just like, an eye opener of like our city is not that accessible to us in non-car ways.
It's funny you say that because we were actually traveling with someone who needed a wheelchair occasionally. And there were instances where like the elevators just weren't working or something. I was like, what? But we said we needed accommodations. So how does this even work? Like even in some of the hotels, they didn't have the right accommodations for someone in a wheelchair. And to the point where we were like, well, maybe we have different definitions of accommodation, like what that means. And so, that's a good point that you're raising in terms of like, what are the needs when you travel? And some people just aren't able to because of a number of barriers. So it's funny thinking about that in the context of what I'm going to share here is getting outside of your world allows you to just have a bigger perspective and how those limitations don't allow that. So it's like, but if you can do it, we encourage it because you really, like again, we went on safari. So when you're literally next to this big ass elephant, you're like,
that's literally a bigger perspective.
That is a really large animal. Or you're looking at the lions and they just had a kill. And so they're like tearing apart this kudu, which is like a really large antelope. And you're like, that is part of the cycle of life that I don't know if I was ready to experience right now, but hey, I'm here for it. It's wonderful. It really allows you to see that this little bit of world that we kind of swirl around in is nothing compared to the larger world that's out there.
Right.
So, yeah.
And so what would you say, like, why does any of what we're saying matter if we think about the DEI side of things?
Yeah, I mean, it matters because it's perspectives. It's people who are different, but you can find similarities with. It's opening yourself up. It's getting uncomfortable. All those things are what those skills, those being able to do those things allow you to be able to do this work or really participate in these types of initiatives well. So getting out and traveling just prepares you to be able to be a better person, a better champion, a better ally, a better supporter, colleague, coworker, whatever it is when you come back to work, because now you can relate a little bit better, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
I agree. I think it sort of becomes that piece of realizing your relative size in the world, right? Mm-hmm. To your point, so it's that idea that the world is bigger than our world, right? And so if you're only in, and again, it highlights, I think for me, like sometimes like we do live in our own bubbles, right? You get used to, a certain thing. And I think one of the biggest things for me about just this idea of like going out in the world and seeing, different views and perspectives, it also helped a lot where it's like, it doesn't have to be the way you think it has to be. And your way is not the only way. I think that's always a big thing of like your way of approaching travel or your way of approaching the preparation of food or your way, it's not the only way. So it's sort of like, even in those moments, like the moment I gave of coming off the train and I'm like, I don't read Dutch. It's like, you don't have to cater to me. This is not, the place I was born. And right. So it's also just kind of being mindful of like, everything doesn't have to be convenient for you.
Speak on it. That's a big one. It humbles you going into these other places because to your point, we're here and we're in a bubble and we think it's about us and everyone needs to cater to us and
how, when where I live, this is how we do it, or the way I say it is this way, and it's like
no one cares.
Pretty much. Now, that having been said, it doesn't mean there's not an opportunity to exchange, because that happened too. Like when we were taking an Uber to the train station in Barcelona, our Uber driver was like, okay, where are you all from? And we're like, oh, we live in Miami. And then he was talking about like how much he wants to visit Miami. And, you know, like, and I was like, that's so funny because I think like the depth of your city is more interesting to me. And he was like, isn't it funny how like everybody always wants like, you know, Europeans want to go to US and US want to come here. And so there are definitely, healthy ways to exchange sort of like cultural differences, but it's more what we're talking about is don't go into it expecting that it's going to cater to you, your needs and what you're used to. Right. And in fact, like if that's the case, you could just stay home.
Just stay.
Right?
In fact, please, because you're going to annoy people. You're going to be annoying.
So I will just say this on that note. It's been mind-boggling to me how often I am reading articles about U.S. travelers going to other countries and behaving in a way that would be acceptable in the U.S., but not acceptable in other countries. It can be really embarrassing. So I suppose an unexpected addition to this episode is please do some research before you go places. There are really amazing websites, travel websites that tell you about the customs in different countries. Please don't walk in the places demanding things and threatening to sue and all these things that don't translate in other places and frankly shouldn't translate into other places. Like, what's your thought about? I know, because I already know you research the heck out of wherever you go. But like, what is your thought about that?
To me, it's the audacity. Is really what kills me about Americans, and I'm an American. Is just the way we show up in these spaces. Folks always say we know who the Americans are when you go to places. Like we can point you out. There's an energy, and I know some people can be like, yeah, because you know America, and America's great. Like, don't get me wrong, America is wonderful in some respects, a lot of respects. Some ways not so much. But I think we show up everywhere. Sometimes. Yeah, there's a pros and cons to everything. But I think sometimes we as Americans show up in spaces that we lack self-awareness. Of our Americanness showing up in spaces and what that does and how that changes the dynamic. Now, you know, it's if you can see yourself and realize it, because there are some times I'll go out with some certain friends and we'll just realize that we're talking really, really loud. And we're just like, ooh, why are we yelling? No one's talking this loud. And so it's that kind of thing, right? So just being aware of the fact that in America, we talk loud. And that's just the thing. And
Miami in particular.
In particular, it's wow. Anyway, so we just being mindful of those things. And again, just what happens and how does that energy affect wherever we are? I think we can always practice a little bit more mindfulness as we travel.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that helps in the end with overall mindfulness. And, you know, as we wrap here, you know, the big sort of takeaway that we hope you sort of take from this is what mindfulness looks like. We talk about mindfulness a lot, and it may sound like, oh God, this like platitude, right? Oh, we need to be mindful, but it shows up in these ways of being willing to expand your mind, being willing to be uncomfortable, being willing to find connections with people you may not think that you have a lot in common with, being humble about approaching environments that you're not familiar with, right? And being humble to that and honoring that you're entering someone else's space, you're a visitor. Yes. And so again, when you're thinking about your trips and your plans, we got you. We're going to give you a checklist in our blog. But again, think about some of these tips. And you know, we work really hard for y'all. So if you love it, like it, Spotify, subscribe so you can get the notifications. We're on Apple, we're on YouTube. So you can see the foolishness live in the flesh if you'd like. Share with your friends, and we'll be back.
Bye.
Here it is. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership. That's the deal when you know what you're dealing with.